Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Please be informed that we will be resuming our discussion on the relationship between uh, forensic, forensic sciences and criminology. So last meeting we have discussed criminology in relation to forensic sciences and certain personalities who had contributed to forensic sciences and the different types of criminalistics or forensic sciences, which includes forensic fingerprinting, art forensics, computational forensics, forensic geology, and so on and so forth. And we ended up with bloodstain pattern and analysis on page 104 of your book. So we will now be resuming with the forensic science timeline. So, in short, this is a brief history of your forensic sciences development. So, we'll be reading and discussing those written in your book. So, in year 44, here's year 44. So, year 44 pertains to the death of an emperor. Julius Caesar was assassinated. Following this event, a physician performed an autopsy and determined that of the 23 wounds, stab wounds, found on the body, only one was fatal. So, isa lang talaga yung nakapatay sa kanya. And in year 400, Germanic and Slavic societies made law that medical experts must be the ones to determine the cause of death in crimes. So nowadays, it is also applicable. So kung meron tayong incident ng pagpatay, possible homicide or murder case, yan, it is only the medical personnel who can or who are authorized to declare death. Hindi pwedeng kahit sino-sinong tao lang. Dapat medical doctor or pathologist ang mag-declare na yes, this person is dead. Okay? And in year 600, fingerprints first used to determine identity. So Arabic merchants would take a debtor's fingerprint in and attach it to the bill. So yung may utang, instead of his signature, fingerprint ang i-stamp niya sa bill. In year 1000, Chinese used fingerprints to sign legal documents. So especially contracts. We use fingerprint as a means of signing such document. And during that year, Roman attorney Quintilian shows that a bloody handprint was intended to frame a blind man for his mother's murder. So dito rin nangyari to, wherein a blind man ngayon is sinet up ng perpetrator. So instampan, nilagyan ng fingerprint, kinuhanan ng fingerprint yung blind man to set up na siya yung pumatay dun sa kanyang parent, ay mama. mother. And in 1248, first forensic science manual published by Chinese. This was the first known record of medical knowledge being used to solve criminal case. So in the 1500s, Ambrose Payer from 1510 to 1590 writes extensively on the anatomy of war and homicidal wounds. So when you say anatomy of war, the body parts of war. So saan ba nag-umpisa ang war? Meron pinag-umpisan yan. At saka meron ding Cold War, meron ding war, homicidal wounds, genocide. When you say homicidal, nakakapatay na sugat. And in 1600s, the first pathology reports were published. So what is again pathology? Study of the internal organs of a cadaver, di ba? So who is a pathologist? They conduct autopsy, di ba? So first pathology reports were published. So first autopsy reports were published in 1600. And in 1609, Francois de Mille publishes the first treatise on document examination in France. So meron ng QD in 1609. And in 1642, University of Leipzig offers the first courses in forensic medicine. So, dito sa forensic medicine, pinag-aaralan yung cause of death or cause of injury. Pinag-aaralan din dito yung mga types of wound, mga abrasions, stab wounds, incise wounds, bullet entrance wounds or bullet exit wounds, gunshot residues, gunpowder tattooing. So, yan ang pinag-aaralan dito sa forensic medicine. Marcelo Malpighi first recognizes fingerprint patterns and used the term loops and whirls in 1605. So, in 1605, Marcelo Malpighi classified the loop patterns and whirl patterns of fingerprints. So, our fingerprints have three main classifications: the loop, the whirl, and the arch. And the loops, we have ulnar and tented and ulnar and radial loops. Sa whirl naman, we have central pocket whirls and so on and so forth. And arch naman, meron tayong plain arch and tented arch. This will be furtherly discussed in your subject, dactyloscopy. So in 1775, we have Paul Revere, who recognized dentures he had made for his friend, Dr. Joseph Warren, and thus identifies the doctor's body in a mass grave at Bunker Hill. So, Paul Revere recognized dentures. So, ito yung ginawa kong uh, dentures ni Dr. Joseph Warren. So, siya to, si Dr. Joseph Warren to, sabi niya. Kasi hindi siguro ma-identify yung mukha, wala ring pagkakilanlang, walang valid ID, so denture yung ginamit niyang pag-identify sa naging kliyente niyang si Dr. Joseph Warren in a mass grave at Bunker Hill. So, mass grave means to say maraming namatay. First recorded instance of physical matching of evidence leading to murder conviction of John Thomas in England. Evidence was a torn edge of newspaper in a pistol that matched newspaper in his pocket. So yun, newspaper was used as an evidence. So the firearm here was wrapped in a newspaper, di ba? However, the newspaper was torn. Tapos, a part of that torn newspaper used to hide the firearm was recovered from his pocket. So, this was in 1784. So, John Towns, who hid firearms with newspaper, but he was detected when they found the piece of that newspaper in his pocket. And in 1800s, we have here Franz Joseph Gall. From 1758 to 1828, he developed the field of phrenology. So when we say phrenology again, it pertains to the study of measurement of your skull, yung ulo, brain, skull, phrenology. German chemist Valentin Ross developed a method of detecting arsenic in a victim's stomach, thus advancing the investigation of poison deaths. That's in 1806. So Valentin Ross detected presence of arsenic compound in victim's stomach, thus advancing investigation of poison deaths. So what causes poison deaths? The arsenic compound. And in 1807, a year after 1806, Andrew Duncan Jr. from 1773 to 1832 becomes the first professor of medical jurisprudence. So when we say medical jurisprudence, it is related with your forensic medicine. So ano rin ang pinag-aaralan dito sa medical jurisprudence? It is all about laws pertaining to medicines. Yan. And the first use of document examination in a criminal investigation involves the analysis of ink dye on a document known as Konigin Handschrift in Germany. So this is in 1810. So part of your document examination, aside from studying the handwriting of a certain person, aside from studying his signature, we also study here the level of ink or the ink dye, the quality of the ink or dye. And this was first presented in 1810 in Germany. And this analysis of ink dye on a document was known as Konigin Handschrift. So, Konigin Handschrift. So nowadays, malalaman din natin yung mga pwede rin natin malaman kung aling printer ang nag-print ng document na yon, di ba? Based on the quality of ink and its defect. So yung kung yung isang printer is may defect sa may bandang gitna, lahat ng may defect sa gitna, yun, print ng printer na yon. Pagka naman yung bagong printer, syempre dahil bago yan, walang ka-defect-defect. Tapos clear na clear yung image. So lahat ng clear na image, walang mga defects sa printing niya, possible na pinint gamit yung bagong printer yan, di ba? So at least meron tayong basihan ng pag-determine kung aling printer kaya yung nag-print niyan. Matthew Joseph Bonaventure Orfila from 1787 to 1853 publishes Strike des Poisons, so Treatise on Poison, the first toxicology textbook. So when we say Treatise on Poison, it involves countries stating that bawal ang paggamit ng poison, especially during war. Huwag tayong maglasunan. This is Matthew Joseph Bonaventure Orfila. And that's in 1813, and in 1816, clothing and shoes of a farm laborer were examined and found to match evidence of a nearby murder scene where a young woman was found drowned in a shallow pool. So clothing and shoes of farm laborer were examined and found to match evidence of a nearby murder scene where a young woman was found drowned in a shallow pool. So means to say, his clothing and his shoes was examined, and there's a possibility that some cloth, tec- uh, cloth texture of the victim was transferred to the perpetrator when he carried the victim. So, nagmatch yung clothes nung ay yung clothing component nung biktima dun sa dumikit, kumapit sa damit at sapatos ng perpetrator. And in 1821, Sir Villas isolates arsenic from human stomach contents and urine, giving birth to the field of forensic toxicology. So, Servulas isolates arsenic from human stomach contents and urine. So now, Servulas uh, can now isolate. When we say isolate, he can separate arsenic or the poisonous compounds from the human stomach contents. So, sa human contents natin, meron din tayong acid na tumutunaw dun sa pagkain. Di ba? So, hinihiwalay din niya yun, mga acid na yun. And hinihiwalay niya rin itong mga to from the urine, thus giving birth to the field of forensic toxicology with the use of studying the separated or isolated arsenic. Johannes Purkinje, in 1823, devises the first crude fingerprint classification system. So, maraming nag-classify ng fingerprint. So, Johannes Purkinje is one. And Henry Gourard matches two bullets to show they came from the same bullet mold. So, ang ginagawa kasi sa firearms identification, it has two. The class identification of that firearm, and second is the individual classification of that firearm. So, when we say firearms classification, kinaklasify natin yung firearms according to its group. So, pwede natin i-classify according to the number of its rifling, kung 4, 5, 6, 7. Pwede natin i-classify according to its type, kung rifle ba or handgun, kung anong handgun kaya, kung rifle, pistol ba or revolver. Yan. Pwede rin natin i-classify according to its manufacture. Ihiwalay natin yung mga Glock sa mga Jericho, sa mga Armscore, sa mga Smith & Wesson, sa Colt and Browning, Spear. So, those are under the scope of firearms classification. So, kinaklasify natin yung uh, baril according to its classification, depending sa group on how we want it to be classified. Nga. And the second phase of firearms identification is your firearms identification of the individual characteristics of that firearm. So, meron tayong yung class characteristics, di ba? So, yun. Classification of firearms yun. Na-classify natin according to their class or group. According to, yun, yung mga nasabi ko kanina, according to manufacturer, according to the number of rifling according to the manufacturer, according to its type, pwede rin naman na according to its purpose, or according to its caliber, ihiwalay natin yung mga caliber 45 sa mga 9mm, and so on and so forth. That's the class characteristics of firearm. Now, individual characteristics of firearm pertains to those that are causing the specific or individual feature of a firearm. So let's say for example, a there were 2 bullets recovered from a crime scene. However, upon comparison of those 2 bullets recovered at the crime scene with the use of bullet comparison microscope, it was determined that they doesn't have the same individual characteristics. Kumbaga, yung individual characteristics ng isang bala is meron siyang shaving mark. So when you say shaving mark is caused by the poor alignment of the cylinder to the bore. So this is only applicable to revolvers. So meron parang may tapyas sa isang side ng bala kasi po nga yung alignment ng cylinder sa bore. However, the other bullet on the other hand doesn't have shaving mark. What it has is a slippage mark. So when you say slippage mark, parang medyo nagasgasan yung kanyang rippling marks kasi uh, oily masyado or overused, pwedeng oversize yung bore. It causes now slippage mark. So means to say, the 2 bullets recovered from the crime scene were fired using 2 separate or 2 different firearms. Yung isa pistol, yung isa hindi natin alam, pwedeng pistol, pwedeng revolver. Pero magkaiba sila ng individual characteristics. So what is again the sources of individual characteristics in firearms? These are caused by the wear and tear of the tools used in manufacturing these firearms. So ano ba yung process ng paggawa ng baril? Specifically sa bore, sa paggawa ng baril, di ba? Ang first is boring, di ba? Bubutasan yung metal para makabuo ng tubo. After that, palalawakin yung butas ng bore. So anong ang tawag doon? Reaming. After nung pagpapalawak, gagawan ngayon ng rifling. So ang tawag doon? Rifling, di ba? So yan, habang ginagamit natin yung instrument to use to drill, to bore, to ream, and to do rifling on the firearm, nagwe-wear and tear yung mga instrument na yon, which causes now the individual characteristics of that barrel. So kung meron ng individual characteristics ngayon yung barrel na yan, lahat naman ng bala na dadaan dyan is whenever there's a trace, whenever there's contact, it leaves a trace. So lahat naman dahil dyan, because of Ducard's principle of exchange, lahat ng bala na dumadaan doon sa barrel na yon is natatransfer sa kanya yung individual characteristics ng firearm na yon. Same is true with shell. Lahat rin naman ng shell na dumadaan doon sa firearm na yon is nagkakaroon rin ng individual characteristics, which we now use to identify the specific firearm which fired a particular bullet or shell. Yan ang ginagawa sa firearms identification. So, who is the father of forensic ballistics? It is Goddard. So, Henry Goddard. And in 1836, James Marsh, an English chemist, uses chemical to process to determine arsenic as the cause of death in a murder trial. So it is Marsh who does chemical examination in detecting presence of arsenic compound as a cause of death in a murder trial. So, ano yung ikinamatay? Natural ba? No, Your Honor. It was caused by poisoning. So, San Francisco in 1854 uses photography for criminal identification. The first city in the US to do so. So, this is now your mugshot. So, they use photography for criminal identification. So, lahat ng mga na-arrest, na-accused, kinukuha ng picture at piniprint, ginagawan ng mugshot. So, they use this photography to identify criminal. The first paper on hair analysis is published in France in 1857. So, how do we determine whether or not a particular hair recovered from event is owned by a certain person? So, maraming inaaral dyan. Second is the presence of protein level of that hair. So, hindi tayo pare-pareho ng level ng protein. Aside from yung DNA, kasi nung panahon to, wala pang DNA dyan. So, according to the protein, according to the thickness of the inner portion of the hair, which can be observed microscopically. So, nakikita lang through the use of microscope. And the color. So, lahat yan inaaral to determine whether or not this particular hair recovered from the crime scene is hair of a certain suspect or not. And in 1858, in Bengal, India, Sir William Herschel requires natives to sign contracts with hand imprint and shows that fingerprints did not change over a 50-year period. So, William Herschel used fingerprint as means of signing document, and they have observed that in 50 years, fingerprint doesn't change. So, hindi napapalitan yung fingerprint. So, yung fingerprint mo nung 10 years old ka, kinuhanan ni record. Hanggang ngayon, kukuha ka, kukuhanin mo yung fingerprint mo, imamatch mo sa fingerprint mo nakuha 10 years ago, pareho pa rin yan. Siguro ang mababago lang is yung laki. Yun lang. Kasi lumaki ka na eh. So syempre, it follows na yung laki ang magiging kaibahan. But the pattern, pareho pa rin yung pattern. In 1868, we have Friedrich Miescher. In 1844 to 1895, he discovered DNA. So, napag-aralan niya yung deoxyribonucleic acid. And in 1875, we have Wilhelm Conrad Röntgen. He discovers X-rays. So, what does X-ray do? It captures the internal structure of your skeleton. Cesar Lombroso in 1876 publishes The Criminal Man, which states that criminals can be identified and classified by their physical characteristics. So, who is your father of modern criminology? Cesar Lombroso. Who is the father of classical criminology? Cesar Beccaria. Henry Ford and William James Herschel published a paper describing the uniqueness of fingerprint. Francis Galton, a scientist, adapted their findings for the court. Galton's system identified the following patterns: plain arch, the tented arch, simple loop, central pocket loop, double loop, lateral pocket loop, plain whirl, and accidental whirl. So take note that we have lots of persons who tried to classify fingerprints before we had the final classification of fingerprints. And Henry Ford shows that powder dusting will expose latent fingerprints. This now, the contribution of Henry Folds is very useful nowadays. So, where do we observe use of powder dusting? Mostly in entrapment operation, in bypass operation, mga ganyan, di ba? So, bago bumili yung pusher buyer, in bypass operation kasi this is how the bypass operation is being conducted. So, meron tayong pusher buyer. A pusher buyer is a person or a police officer who uh, who acts as a civilian buyer of drugs, illegal drugs, di ba? So, magpapanggap siyang buyer.